Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Sunday Matinee. I'm your host, Ben Stahl. This is episode 52. The road to 100 continues today, and we're going to jump back into some Marvel stuff because we're a little over. I'd say we're a little bit overdue on this one. Thor has been out for almost a month, but we finally have some time to sit down and chat about it. But before we jump into anything at all, I, of course, will introduce the lone panelist for the day, Travis Martinez. Travis, welcome back.
Good to be back, as always.
Yep, it's good to have you here talking about comic book stuff, because I know you are one of the big fans. This is definitely between you and me one of the things we just love to talk about. Which is why, instead of doing the sort of traditional news bits, I decided, since this was going to be you and me, that we would talk exclusively for the news about Marvel at Comic-Con, because that's something I haven't gotten to talk about yet. And wow, it was an exciting day. I was at a family gathering, so I was just constantly updating Twitter and seeing what was happening. So before we talk about it, I'm just going to do a little rundown here of what we can expect going forward from Marvel, literally starting with their next Phase 4 project. A lot of these early ones, of course, is stuff that we had known about for a long time. Some of them are stuff we knew about, but we now have release dates for. And there were some nice surprises in there. So coming very soon to Disney Plus. In fact, today being July 31st, 17 days until She-Hulk Attorney at Law debuts on Disney Plus. That got a new trailer that teased villains and heroes. We got to see Wong. We got to see a Daredevil tease. So that's going to be interesting. I know there's been some criticisms of some of the CG in it, but I'm still looking forward to it because I think that Tatiana Maslany is a great actor, and Mark Ruffalo, Tim Roth. It's going to be fun. So we'll see how that rolls. There was no mention, curiously, and I'm betting they saved this reveal for D23, of the Werewolf by Night Halloween special that is supposed to be coming. I mean, I imagine that's still on course, but it was not mentioned at all during this panel. So the next big release date.
Wars.
Yeah, there were a couple. That one in particular is curious, just because October is now about 2 months away. And surely that is when they're going to debut it, right? It's got to be. It's a Halloween special. But after that, November 11th, we have Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, which we'll talk about the trailer in just a minute, but they dropped the trailer for that, and it was awesome. They did not make mention of the Guardians Holiday Special. Again, another curious omission, but, we know that's coming, and I don't know if that's technically going to fall under Phase 4, if it actually is the true beginning of Phase 5. Because they talked about how Black Panther is going to be the end of Phase 4. So I don't know. Yeah, that Guardian special should be interesting. But now we move into Phase 5. Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, February 17th, 2023. There was footage shown. Some of it got leaked online. I took a look at it. And it's this isn't worth watching because this is really terrible phone capture. So, just be patient, world. It'll show up. It'll happen. Spring 2023 will be the first Disney Plus show of Phase 5, Secret Invasion. We finally get to see what Nick Fury has been doing in space this whole time. We should see some Skrulls. We should see Rhodey back. So, expect the unexpected with this one. I'm very excited for it, and I believe it's the first Disney Plus event series as opposed to a singular hero. Am I correct in that? We haven't had a Disney Plus event show yet, right?
Not that I know of. It's mostly just been standalone stories, as far as I can tell.
Yeah. That's what I thought.
Nothing major event that could lead into the future and what they're building up to.
Yeah, so that'll be interesting. I hope it pans out because I'd love to see them do more event series like that. We already knew the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 was coming May 5th, 2023. The big thing to come out of that was, again, footage, but it's not going to show up. We're not going to get a trailer anytime soon. James Gunn was adamant that he did not want the trailer to be released publicly because there's plenty of special effects stuff that is yet to be finished. And, you know, I have faith. I have faith in him. He's very forthright and honest when it comes to these films. And he's also absolutely, if you follow him on Twitter, the best at calling out bad rumors. He debunks that stuff so fast. It's quite hilarious. Summer 2023, we have Marvel Studios' Echo on Disney Plus. This would be an interesting one. I think more people are excited for it because Daredevil and Kingpin are going to be in it.
Yeah,
we'll see how it goes. You know, Echo. I think Echo is a cool character, but it speaks to something that they have to bring in Daredevil and Kingpin. I don't know. I think it's just a shame that that's what's getting people excited more about it than just Echo herself. So we got a ways to go till that. Summer 2023 also brings what is probably amongst most casual fans the most exciting Disney Plus series, season 2 of Loki, because the world loves Loki. And last we heard, just about everyone who survives the first season of Loki should be coming back, which is great because Tom Hiddleston and Owen Wilson have some wonderful chemistry, and I'm excited to see what they're going to do again. November 3rd, 2023, we have Blade. Oh, you know what? This list I have here completely, I have to backtrack because July 2023, we're getting the Marvels, which somehow is not on this list. And they did talk about the Marvels. Didn't show anything, but we know that we're going to get Carol Danvers. We know we're going to get Kamala Khan. And oh my gosh, why am I forgetting her name?
Maria Rambeau?
Monica Rambeau. Yeah, so we're getting all three. Yeah, I know those two are so easy to mix up. It's those M names.
Yeah.
So I'm very excited for that. We're not going to talk about Miss Marvel today, but considering where Miss Marvel left off, gets me all the more excited for this film next July. But then Blade got a release date of November 3rd, 2023. I'm excited for this one. I'm excited for Marvel to dive into the horror side of, the comic books, which they did a little bit in Moon Knight, did a little bit more in Doctor Strange, but we could be seeing some vampires, and I am always down for that. Fall 2023 should also see the debut of Ironheart, which will feature Riri Williams, who should be making her debut. Well, we know she'll be making her debut in Black Panther. She's in the trailer. So finally, an Iron character is coming back. And coming winter 2023/2024, the retitled Agatha Coven of Chaos will see the return of Catherine Hahn as Agatha Harkness. And I know WandaVision fans are going to be excited for that. And then spring 2024, this had been previously announced, but nonetheless was an awesome reveal. Daredevil, Born Again. I think the biggest surprise to come out of this announcement was that it is currently planned to be 18 episodes long, which is triple the amount of your typical Marvel television series at this point.
Yep.
So they're either going on short episodes, or they're just going all in on this one because they know that this is one that fans have wanted for several years now. I think of all the Netflix shows, everyone was just waiting for Daredevil to be the one to come back. So,
and more than likely, he's going to retcon a lot of the Netflix stuff.
Yep, I have a feeling we're going to see that just in She-Hulk, given that it looks like Matt Murdock is wearing the classic yellow suit in that series. And then the first big movie of 2024, one that I'm personally excited for, Captain America: New World Order. Sam Wilson is going full on Cap this time. There's no question he is Captain America. But we really don't know much else about the film. It's still 2 years away. And then July 25th, 2024, the poor Avengers are going to be taking a back seat. There's a new squad in town, the Thunderbolts, which in the comic books, there's been several iterations of the Thunderbolts, but they're traditionally a team of villains or anti-heroes assembled by the government. In fact, they were, I believe the first iteration was assembled by General Ross, who unfortunately now they cannot bring back to the movies because William Hurt passed away earlier this year. But
hence the name Thunderbolts, like General Thunderbolt Ross.
That doesn't mean that he will not. He'll probably get a mention in this film.
My theory is that he put the initiation into place, and then he passed away, and then it's probably like going to come up full circle with him. That's my theory.
I think that's a good theory because, it's, the name's right there. Mm-hmm. Now, Phase 6 is interesting, and we're going to talk a little bit about Phase 6 in a minute because there are several slots for Phase 6, but only 3 announcements were made. The first was that Fantastic Four, which we knew was going to happen, has a release date of November 8th, 2024. And then the 2 next announcements were slightly spoiled right before Comic-Con because eagle-eyed folks on the internet had noticed that Marvel had filed 2 trademarks for movie titles. So May 2nd, 2025, Avengers: The Kang Dynasty. Not terribly surprising considering that, they've kind of been teasing that Kang is going to be the next big villain for this saga. And then November 7th, 2025, Avengers: Secret Wars. This should theoretically be where the multiverse. And if you're listening, Travis is literally pumping his fist because yes, Travis called this quite a while ago. It makes total sense. I called it
at least in No Way Home. I can't remember if I called it before then, but I knew it. But on video, I had it at least in No Way Home that I said, we're building up to Secret Wars.
And I'm glad you were right. The only thing that tripped me up when these titles sort of leaked was my first thought was, I bet they're Avengers movies, but my first thought was maybe Marvel is playing another trick on us like they did with Captain America: The Serpent Society way back in 2014. Because I remember them announcing that and literally everyone just sort of like being incredibly disappointed, like, oh man, we thought we were getting Civil War. And then they, of course, were like, gotcha. But no, this was not a gotcha. This is the real deal. Of course, that being said, it's also Marvel. They could also change the titles of any of these films. We, of course, remember way back in the day, Infinity War was technically a 2-parter.
Part 1, Part 2, and then they changed it to Endgame to distinguish them from each other.
So I don't think we're going to get any name changes here just because Secret Wars is such an iconic event in Marvel history.
If anything, the Kang Dynasty is the closest I would get a name change.
Yeah, it could happen. So that is what came out of Marvel's Comic-Con. I didn't even mention the animation stuff, just because they sort of kept it separate, and it's very difficult right now to tell with Marvel how the animation stuff really fits into their greater plan, whether it's, even if it's sort of canon in the sense that it's multiverse stuff, it's really difficult to say how it's going to affect the greater MCU. So my first question about all this, Travis, is which of these announced projects are actually, hold on. There were a couple other things missing. We already mentioned Werewolf by Night, the Guardian Special, Armor Wars. Also notably missing, which we know is happening, are Wonder Man, Shang-Chi 2, Deadpool 3, and a Disney Plus series that is somehow revolved around Wakanda. That is, and of course we know that they're developing something with the X-Men down the road, but they have not really teased a title or even like. And there's definitely there's a release date controversy with that too right now. With like I've heard tell that it's because like the contracts for the actors who had appeared in the previous X-Men films, it somehow entitles them to not be recast until 2025 at the earliest. So that may be why we're not going to hear about the X-Men for a little while.
Yeah, because when Disney bought Fox, they had to take the contracts with them. That doesn't nullify those contracts, which is why we saw Evan Peters return as Quicksilver in WandaVision and Patrick Stewart in Multiverse of Madness, because they were already attached to the roles. From what I hear, there's talks that they want to make a film called The Mutants, which people are speculating may focus on like characters that have not yet been played or characters where contracts are not involved, just to get an X-Men film out there. And then 2026 they'll have their own. Also, if you're hearing noises on my end, I do apologize. My family is they're currently firing off right now, so sorry for any random sounds. I do believe that we are going to see Fox X-Men characters, like those actors, come back in Secret War, since it's going to involve multiverse, and since that's coming out in 2025, right when those contracts are expiring. But that's a theory, just a theory right now for me.
I know I'm going to love and hate Twitter in the months leading up to Secret Wars, because it's going to be worse than Multiverse of Madness was, with people on Twitter just trying to get attention by saying, I know that so-and-so is going to be in this movie, and then they'll end up being, of course, completely off.
There's already people being like, oh, confirm Andrew Garfield, Tobey Maguire, and Patrick Stewart all returning for Secret Wars. And I'm like, unless you're hearing it from Marvel or Papa Feige, don't consider it confirmed at this point.
Yeah.
I want them to come back. I do, but like, I don't want to get my hopes up.
Yeah, it'd be fun to have a lot of these people come back, but again, I would like Marvel to keep a tighter lid on Secret Wars and on Kang Dynasty and pretty much everything going forward than they did with Multiverse of Madness, because it was so. It just became such it just became a too huge a thing that people were freaking out, like, oh, they're teasing Professor X and that's why we want to go see this. And it's like, just go see it because it's a Marvel project and it's going to be fun.
Yeah, I hope that it's going to have more of a No Way Home thing, how they kept it under wraps as opposed to a Multiverse of Madness.
Yeah, well, we will see. So now that we've talked about all that, what are you most excited for out of all of this?
Honestly, I think right now, Thunderbolts, just because I'm interested in seeing that, like how they're going to handle it, and like some of the characters we can speculate at this time, because I can say with like 99.9% confidence, just having that 0.1% as a leeway, that Abomination's going to fill the Red Hulk position that is normally filled in the comic books. So I think it's going to be interesting to see that. Fantastic Four could take that spot, but I have to wait to hear who the cast is. That's my big thing right now. There is a rumor or something that Jason Siegel is going to play Ben Grimm in the She-Hulk series, which is like, I love Jason Siegel, but I don't see him as a Ben Grimm. Like I could see him fitting like a comedic tone like She-Hulk, but I don't want to see him play the main MCU Ben Grimm.
Yeah, very little is known about Fantastic Four, and I think that is one that will drum up a lot of excitement once we know more, once we know who's in the director's chair, and once we know who the main cast is.
Yeah, because from what I hear, Feige wants to get a A-list director, an experienced director for that one, so he doesn't have to oversee it like he does with a lot of his indie directors who are taking the big blockbuster Hollywood directing chair for the first time.
And it is unfortunate that that project lost John Watts, who, of course, directed Tom Holland's Spider-Man trilogy. But I also, again, I've said this before, I can't blame him if he's feeling burned out on superhero films. Take a break. Like,
Actually, my most excited would probably be Secret Wars, but I figured that was too easy of an answer. So, like, so I'm gonna say Thunderbolts just for because I want to see Marvel Suicide Squad.
yeah, I've been excited about that, ever since way back in, I want to say 2017 when James Gunn said it's the one he wanted to do next. Um, it won't be Gunn, but that's because we got him working diligently on Guardians. For me, it's Daredevil. I loved Daredevil on Netflix so much. I am totally down for them retconning a lot of stuff. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with toning down the violence that was a huge part of that series. I fairly recently rewatched season 2, and just within 5 minutes of the first episode, the Punisher guns down a whole bunch of mobsters, and it is brutal and bloody and not the kind of thing that you expect to see in the MCU with parents watching this with their children. It's something. So but as you and I discussed before, Matt Reeves, the Batman, is a perfect proof of concept that you can do a dark and gritty story without going into the real ultra violence that Daredevil showed.
Yeah. My thing with that show too is I'm curious on how they're going to address the other Netflix Marvel shows, like, because I know they're recasting Elektra. I think they confirmed that for this show. So I'm wondering how they're going to handle Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, and Punisher, if they're going to bring back those actors since they're bringing back Charlie Cox.
I hope in several cases that they do. I would not. I do think that Finn Jones gets a bad rap, and I think that the script is more the problem of Iron Fist than anything else. But just to sort of smooth things over with fans, I would not be surprised if Marvel decided when they bring Iron Fist back to recast him. But I think there's a pretty general consensus that a lot of those actors we would love to have back. Kristen Ritter just signed on with AMC to star in a new Orphan Black series for them. So that could be problematic in getting her back into the MCU if there's a schedule conflict. But I'd say she's easily my number 2 to come back because she was so good in her show.
I mean, if they want to make them films, I wouldn't be against Terry Crews playing Luke Cage in the film.
Terry Crews would be a fun Luke Cage.
I know he expressed interest in the role when they were talking about it. So, but I think he was just too big of a star for a Netflix show.
I have not heard anything about the recasting of Elektra, so I'm going to look that up at some point. Keep tabs on that, as I tend to keep tabs on all this Marvel stuff, because there's never not news going on with Marvel. It's the machine that keeps on pumping out stuff. So now that we know what we're most excited for, as I mentioned, there are several slots in Phase 6 that we don't know about yet, and there are eight unannounced Phase 6 projects. So, and at this point, I'm not even factoring in Sony's potential plans for Spider-Man 4 or 5, however many they're going to end up making with Tom Holland and with Marvel Studios, because they tend to make those announcements independently of Disney and Marvel at a later date, which can be frustrating because we love to try and pinpoint where all these are going to be at. But and it also ends up causing problems sometimes where, like, if Marvel say, when No Way Home was announced, the original plan was for Doctor Strange to come first. Well, Sony didn't budge, Marvel had to budge, and then we had to change things around for those films. But I think it ultimately worked out. It's just like, what are Sony's plans? We don't know. So I'm not going to include any Spider-Man movies in this next question here. If you want to, if you've already planned that out, that's totally cool. To think that there, on top of these 8 films, there could be a 9th film in there. It's just insane that or television project
in
or whatever.
3 years.
Yeah. But I will ask, what do you think these 8 unannounced Phase 6 projects are?
So funny enough, when they announced this, I do have a TikTok, and I wanted to make a top 10 movies and shows that I think are going to be in it. You mentioned like some ideas like Shang-Chi 2, Deadpool 3. The only thing I have up with Shang-Chi, see Shang-Chi 2, but the director for that just signed on for Kang Dynasty. So would he have the time to do both is the question, unless they want to get a different director, and they're pretty good at keeping directors as long as they're on good terms. And would Deadpool 3 be considered a MCU film or a finale to the Fox films? Since it's rumored that it's going to follow him being transported from his universe into the MCU. But with that being said, I do think Armored Wars is going to be in there. They announced it. I feel like it's a good bet. And they just probably thought, oh, with Fantastic Four and 2 Avengers movies, it's going to get buried underneath everything. Thor 5, I think, could have been a good choice, but Taika Waititi has said that he kind of wants to space them out right now. But my Spider-Man 4, obviously, I don't want to see the Venom symbiote in that film, unless it's a last scene or after credit to set up Secret Wars, since Secret Wars, I think, in the 80s or whatever year that one came out with, featured a first appearance of Black Suit Spider-Man. So I think they could add that to Secret Wars as a nice little nod. But my number one, sorry, I just went on a huge tangent just saying all that. Okay. My number one that I am confident is going to be in one of those is Doctor Strange 3. Because Doctor Strange 2, I think, was a good setup for the idea of the multiverse. And I feel like Doctor Strange 3 was set up to introduce convergence, universes colliding. And I feel like that's going to be the big threat of the Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars, is that Kang and his variants are all going to go to war with each other, and that's going to cause incursions, and that's why the Avengers have to stop them, or at the very least, keep a good Kang in charge of stuff. And I feel like Doctor Strange needs to be there to set that up. So when audiences go in, they're like, oh God, there's like millions of convergences, universes colliding, being destroyed. Set up what they are, their impact, and like how they work and all that. So that's my big number one. I'm confident is going to be in there.
All right, here are my 8 picks. I don't have these spread out in an order that makes sense. I just jumped into what the first titles that came to mind. I'm actually pretty sure we're going to get Shang-Chi 2 before, at least certainly before Secret Wars, probably before Kang Dynasty. I think that that the 10 rings are potentially going to play a part, at the very least, in signaling something that's out there, maybe one of the Kang variants.
Yeah.
I know it feels a little bit like a cop out at this point that the 10 rings might end up being like the next Infinity Stones, but they're doing something.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to know what that is sooner than later. I would bet Wonder Man is a good. Oh, maybe not, but I'm going to throw Wonder Man in there because we didn't cover a lot of Disney Plus stuff.
Yeah. I will say I forgot. I'm confident Namor might get like either a Disney Plus series or movie, considering he's being set up in Black.
I didn't even think of that. That would be so cool because he is, mainstream audiences really don't know Namor that much. And I think I'm really grateful that they're kind of distancing themselves from Atlantis so that we don't draw too many comparisons to Aquaman. But, comic book fans know that Namor is one of the original characters that Marvel, came up with way back in the day. So he is just legacy, absolute legacy right there for the fans. So I honestly, that's a great idea, and I kind of hope they roll with that.
And now that, sorry, I didn't really plan this out, but like, since they established some of these characters in Multiverse of Madness, part of me is thinking, could Doctor Strange be setting up his own Illuminati, and could we see the Inhumans come back in like a soft reboot?
It's all of this is very possible. Like I'm literally going in with mostly the information that we know at this point, and
Yeah,
they do tend to surprise us. You know, they did a really good job of keeping Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars under wraps until that day before they made
yeah,
the announcement. Um, I agree with you that Deadpool 3 is a very strong contender since they've been in work with Ryan Reynolds for a long time now. It could be an interesting film if it tries to bridge that gap between old and new with Fox and Disney. But I'm mostly just excited to see what he's going to do when he does finally show up and
yeah.
team up with a bunch of characters who are not going to be ready for his antics.
Spider-Man and Deadpool.
Yeah. I agree that Doctor Strange 3 is going to be a huge one. I have a feeling that they're going to try and fast track that because it's probably going to be a very important setup. I think Doctor Strange is sort of going to be phase 5 and 6's like Iron Man, Spider-Man character, and that Marvel really wants to push this one because his stories are going to be the ones that build up a lot towards what we get. This one I think is a bit of a long shot, and they may wait until like phase 7 to jump back into this, but I do think that Eternals 2 is a possibility. It may be one that doesn't tie in as much to the multiverse saga and instead starts to set up whatever their next saga is. Some people are thinking it might be the Eternity saga. So it's a possibility. I know they're working on it. I just don't know where they're at with it. Yeah. I think we have a good chance at seeing on Disney Plus a Young Avengers TV series because I don't want to wait until the next Avengers proper series to see Kate Bishop and some of these younger characters that they're introducing. Haley Steinfeld was one of the best parts of Hawkeye, and I'm ready for this new young team to come together and screw up hilariously, and then prove to these veteran heroes that we got what it takes.
And they're not going to be young forever.
Yep. My last two, I think, are an absolute long shot. But this one mainly because I think if they do it, will once again feel like it's something that set itself apart. But my goodness, I want season 2 of Moon Knight. Mainly because you can't leave us where you left us with that. It's cruel and unusual to just tease that and be like, we're done. That's it. That's all you're getting from Moon Knight. No, I want more. I don't think he's going to become a huge part of the sort of greater lore that we're seeing the way he was in season 1. But I honestly don't mind. I just want him to still be out there somewhere. And then my last one, and again, this is a long shot because they haven't really, apart from some recent comments from Ryan Gosling, there really hasn't been much talk about Ghost Rider, but I would love, since we're getting Blade, Doctor Strange is already a big deal, Ghost Rider, start introducing these types of characters so that we can get, maybe not, I don't know if they'd do this as a movie, but like a Midnight Suns type of team.
Yeah.
Supernatural, I'm just really excited for that.
Yeah. There's been talks that people thought they saw a Johnny Blaze Easter egg in the She-Hulk series.
Yep. So that's also like great setup right there, just throwing it in the background. Yeah. So
those are all good choices.
So are yours. I appreciate that you brought in stuff that was much more sort of unexpected, like stuff that doesn't feel like it's being teased. Like, Namor, what a great idea. Set this guy up and then give him his own story because, he may be looking like the villain of Black Panther, but this guy is complicated. He's not a villain.
I mean, he's an anti-hero. He's like morally questionable. And then there's also talks that the whole war between him and Wakanda is secretly being set up by Doctor Doom, who's also may also play a part in Secret Wars. So it's just like a lot of like, we'll see.
The one thing I want to say about Fantastic Four is I honestly don't want them to start off with Doctor Doom. They've tried it twice. Give him a different villain. You know, I know it's also not an origin story, which I think is a little bit risky because there are still people out there who, despite the fact that we've had 3 Fantastic Four films since in the last 15 or so years, there's still people out there who either avoided them, just didn't care, who aren't as aware. Like Spider-Man, yeah, everyone knows. Like Spider-Man, Batman, like, Hulk, yeah.
And even then, the Fantastic Four have had many changes to the origins, so it's not like Kevin Feige saying like, "Oh, everybody knows it." Like, there's been the cosmic rays, there's been teleportation. It's just like, let us know what this team's origin is.
Yeah,
because I want to see Mole Man. Honestly, it's like we had a tease of him in the 2015 film. Like, I want to see him as a full-fledged villain. And they're setting up Skrull so we can see Super Skrull.
Yeah. Anything is possible with this film, and that's the joy of it.
And I feel like that one's also going to be big on setting up Kang Dynasty, considering Mr. Fantastic is related to Kang. And we see him use similar technology to the TVA in Multiverse of Madness.
Yep, that's a lot. There's so much to look forward to. It's going to be an exciting couple of years, and even though we still have that huge 8-film and show gap where we're just kind of waiting on that, it feels like going back to 2019 when they announced Phase 4. It's like, yes, okay, but even more so now that we have a sense of like how it's all what it's all leading up to, and I think that's just the most exciting part. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about with the Comic-Con for Marvel?
I mean, there's just a couple of things that may not be too important. I just wanted to bring up one possible theory that I have. A lot of people are saying like Kang's going to be the Thanos, and I agree. He's like the big main villain of the multiverse saga. But my theory is that we're not going to have a singular Kang as a major villain, but instead we're just going to see variants of him throughout the films. Like we're getting one of him in Ant-Man Quantumania. We're set to get a variant in season 2. Fantastic Four, I'm sure, is going to have something to do with him. We're going to see him pop up here and there. And then my theory is that the Kang Dynasty is like his variants going to war, like it was set up in Loki season 1. And it's a matter of just stopping all of them and not a singular one. But then the events of that film is going to cause like universes colliding, which will set up secret wars. That's my big theory. So we're not going to have one big Thanos. We're going to have like a bunch of villains that could be standalone hero villains, but the fact that they're all going together, it's like a big enough Avengers level threat. That's my big theory right now. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but if I'm right, I can point back to this video and say I got bragging rights.
Darn right. Yep. Again, just excited.
Mm-hmm.
You know, knowing that there's something with Marvel beyond next year is good. So one thing I'm going to do real quick. We originally had planned to record this much earlier. There were technical issues, so we're recording now. So now I have the latest box office estimates for the weekend, so I can include that now instead of editing it in later. Yay! So the weekend of July 29th through 31st. So number 1 with an estimated 23 million is DC League of Super Pets. That's right. This is DC's second film of the year. It's animated. It's goofy. It's getting surprisingly good reviews. It's probably one I'll end up missing because there's a lot more in the theater I want to see first.
Yeah.
But you know,
not the last time we're going to see The Rock in a DC film this year.
Correct. Dropping from number 1 to number 2 is Jordan Peele's Nope, bringing in an estimated 18.5 million. I'm honestly a little bit surprised that Nope got dethroned as of right now. That could change when the actual box office receipts are totaled. But, it's summer. It's family film time. Thor, Love and Thunder has dropped from second to third, a 42% drop of 13 million. And honestly, given the trend that some recent Marvel films have had at the box office, a 42% drop over the last week ain't that bad. Dropping from third to fourth is Minions: The Rise of Gru, bringing in 10.88 million. Holding at number 5 is Top Gun Maverick with 8.2 million. That is just the darling of this summer and quite an interesting anomaly. To me, that film was just a sign that the world was ready to see an action film that wasn't filmed entirely in a green screen. It was just, it's time. And, I can't disagree with that. There's something that is just jaw-dropping when you look at a film and you see it and it's like, oh, they really filmed that. So dropping from fourth to sixth is Where the Crawdads Sing with 7.5 million. Dropping from sixth to seventh is Elvis with 5.83 million. Holding at number 8 is The Black Phone with 2.49 million. Holding at number 9, Jurassic World Dominion with 2.08 million. And opening in theaters this weekend is Vengeance, which stars, it's BJ Novak, right, from The Office?
Yeah.
Starring BJ Novak, opened at 1.75 million. Should be noted, though, that opened in 998 theaters. So 1.75, not a bad opening for a film that opened under 1,000 theaters. So that is the box office for the week. We'll talk more about Thor's box office later on in the episode, but it is time to move on to what we're watching, actually, before we jump into Thor. Really haven't been watching that much this week. While I was writing a lot of stuff for this episode yesterday, I popped on The Meg because I wanted to watch a shark movie. It's summertime. It is extraordinarily hot. Watching a movie that takes place in the water, it may not really cool me off, but psychologically, it does something to you. So, and, I just wanted to pop on something dumb. And The Meg it's dumb fun without being eye-rolling and incredibly stupid. I think it's still fun. It's just, it knows exactly what it is. It's not trying to be Jaws. It's just trying to be The Meg. Travis, have you watched anything this week?
Nothing really too new. Been just trying to relax since this was our closing weekend and the week before was our opening weekend, so I had not had much time to watch stuff. The most I probably did was rewatch some old TV shows that I used to watch. Like I rewatched some My Name is Earl. I rewatched some of the PJs for anybody who remembers that old stop motion show. Not much new, just added some stuff to my collection. Been wanting to just relax over this next week as much as I can. Just watch some stuff, and that's it for me.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of times people answer with, just went back to my comfort shows.
Yep.
And I'm well overdue for a rewatch of Futurama, just because. So that may happen soon.
I actually watched some of that today too, trying to get back on rewatching it.
Yep, amazing show.
Getting ready for the revival.
Yes. But now it is time to talk about Thor: Love and Thunder. Mm-hmm. So the first thing I want to talk about is let's rewind 3 years to Comic-Con 2019 when this film was announced. And I just want to know, what was your reaction when you realized that Thor was going to be the first MCU franchise outside of the Avengers to get a fourth installment?
I mean, I thought it was interesting, but part of me was also saying is like, well, the first two Thor movies were not beloved, so I feel like they would want to get a few other Thor movies in there with Taika Waititi and Chris Hemsworth. And I figured like, hey, we need a conclusion Chris Hemsworth's Thor. That's what I thought Love and Thunder was gonna be, like a conclusion to Chris Evans's Captain America, Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man. I thought we were gonna see a conclusion for Chris Hemsworth, but we'll get more on that later. But like, yeah, like I was at least pleasantly surprised. But then when you think about it, you're like, all right, this kind of makes sense, and I was really looking forward to it because again, I love Ragnarok, and I wanted to see the team come back together and deliver another one.
Yeah, I had a very similar reaction because for several years after Iron Man 3, we were waiting for Marvel to say, okay, we're going to do another Iron Man movie with Robert Downey Jr. Instead, he just kept showing up in everyone else's movies, which was great. It was great to see him teaming up. Well, not really teaming up, but being Spider-Man's mentor for a movie. To show up in Civil War. But we were waiting, and part of that I think was because Iron Man was so huge to kick off the MCU that they rushed through his trilogy very quickly. It wasn't spread out the way that Cap's and particularly Thor's were, and that we're used to at this point. We're still waiting on, this big long gap between Guardians 2 and 3, between Ant-Man 2 and 3. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it felt like they got through Iron Man's trilogy very quickly. So it was like okay, Iron Man should theoretically be the first one to get there, but no.
I believe Iron Man 2 was supposed to be an Ant-Man movie because I thought, from what I hear, they wanted Ant-Man and Wasp to be in the first Avengers movie to line up with the lineup in the first ever Avengers plus Captain America. But then Edgar Wright had had conflicts with Marvel, and it got pushed back, and they're like, all right, we need a success, so let's fast track Iron Man 2. That's just rumors I've heard. I don't know how true that is.
I'm trying to think back because I think you might. I know that. I think it was because at that time, Wright would have been working on the Iron Man 2 era, so he would have been Scott Pilgrim. He would have been working on Scott Pilgrim, and then he went almost immediately from Scott Pilgrim into The World's End, and finally, after all those years, started working on Ant-Man. And unfortunately, of course, we lost his great contribution, but still got a good movie out of it. I wouldn't be surprised at all if that was true, that they wanted an Ant-Man movie that early, because, of course, yeah, you're right. Ant-Man and the Wasp in the comics are founding members. So,
yeah, and
instead,
like again, that was just rumors I've heard, and like when they got removed, that's when Hawkeye and Black Widow got added to the mix to fill kind of those positions. But again, rumors. I don't have any solid sources. I think it's interesting to think of.
I'll have to track that. I love keeping tabs on old Marvel history too. It's fascinating to just look at the stories of like what films came to be and the struggles they went through. But yeah, they had a hit with Iron Man. Iron Man's trilogy was just, it felt like it was done so fast, and then it was like, how are we going to bring back Tony Stark? Because we have to bring back Tony.
Yeah.
So we never got an Iron Man 4. My favorite theory was the theory that Civil War would be 2 films, a Civil War Captain America and then a Civil War Iron Man film. But we got the one, and it worked. Yeah. But at the end of Phase 3, at the end of everything in Endgame, left me thinking, oh, well, at this point, Cap's going to be the first franchise, not character at this point, but franchise to get a 4th film because we have a new Captain America, and they're going to want to get him up on the big screen as soon as possible. Well, that turned out to be a Disney Plus show. But Thor lived through Endgame. So, what you said about, thinking about it, yeah, like Thor's popularity between 2017 and 2019 with Ragnarok, Infinity War, and Endgame, his popularity surged, and he was suddenly one of the most beloved characters on the team, which it took them so long to get audiences to really connect with him. because like you said, I like the first Thor movie, but I understand why it's not a beloved film. Thor 2, yeah, it's pretty much very close to the bottom of just about everyone's Marvel list.
Yeah.
And his character just didn't do enough in Ultron that, Ultron was definitely a Steve and Tony Civil War brewing type of movie.
And his whole like Infinity War visions in the pool and all that was just kind of dumb and pointless. But from what I hear, that was added by Marvel to set up Thanos. It was not a choice of the filmmaker.
There's a lot of nonsense about Ultron that is just it's such a curious film.
Yeah.
But, we left off with Thor alive and hanging out with the Guardians, more popular than ever. So it happened, Love and Thunder. And I was like, okay, cool. Taika's coming back, so we're going to get hopefully a sort of continuation of what we've been building off of since Ragnarok. So here we are, 3 years since Endgame. So let's talk about Love and Thunder. Start with the typical sort of questions I do for these types of things.
Yep.
What worked? What didn't work? What were your favorite characters, performances, scenes? How did the movie make you feel?
Like upon first viewing, I just loved it, but I think that's because I was going in just excited because, like I said, I loved Ragnarok. I've been waiting for this film for a while, and all that. That when I went in, I thought it was better the first time than on the second viewing. Upon second viewing, there are definitely some problems, I will admit. What I feel like worked, the stuff I liked. It was very unique. It's like it still has the Taika Waititi style. It's got some very unique action sequences, especially in the Shadow Realm, and Chris Hemsworth, as always, really great as Thor. The man was born to play the role. Yep. Christian Bale stole the show as Gore, the God Butcher. I wanted more scenes with him. He has so few scenes, but from what I hear, it was a 4-hour cut initially, so obviously a lot of his stuff got cut. And you said stuff that you wanted stuff that also didn't work, in my opinion. Sorry, I missed.
Yeah. What didn't work? Just your general impressions.
What didn't work, I felt like it went too far with the comedy at times. I get it, Ragnarok was funny, but even Ragnarok had those serious moments where they stopped and looked at the weight of situations. I think the biggest example being Odin's death. Since originally they filmed it where he was a bum being crazy on the street, and they were just like, that's not a good send-off to the character or the actor. Let's refilm it, and they give him a more dignified death scene where there's no jokes. It was just the actors, sharing a final goodbye with each other and the character saying goodbye to their father. Whereas here, there's not that many scenes like that. Most of the serious scenes in this film are undercut by quips and jokes and all that. That it's like, okay, some of them are funny, but we're dealing with a character who has cancer here, and so I felt like they should not have that many jokes during scenes like that. And then there are some jokes that I feel like didn't work within context in the universe, like the infamous Infinity Stones in New Asgard. I'm like,
yeah,
I get maybe it's a commentary on Disney and all that, but still within context of the universe, who would make a store based off of mass genocide of half of all life in the universe? It just felt so wrong, honestly. And some of the writing was off, pacing issues were bad. Korg and Valkyrie, I felt like didn't have that big of a significance in the story. It felt like they were mostly just there. And more of the focus was put on Jane and Thor's thing, which is great. But if you're going to have these characters also tag along, write something in there that has more significance for them, like they did in Ragnarok.
Yeah. this film is probably the most mixed bag of Phase 4 because there's of course a lot. For me, what worked is doubling down on the humor that worked in Ragnarok. I think is a good idea. It definitely sets the Thor films apart from the much more grounded and serious Captain America films, and of course the Iron Man films, and a lot of the other stuff that's like Doctor Strange, which is very grounded and dark.
And I don't have a problem with them doubling down on the humor. It's just I feel like you still need those like at least some grounded moments, so there's weight to the stuff that happens, so you feel like there's stakes. To everything, because if everybody's just joking and having fun, it's just like, all right, so let's not take this serious at all, And when you got a character who's killing gods and kidnapping children, and again, characters with cancer, it's like these are some of the heavy themes for the MCU, and has the most levity out of everything. It's a similar problem I have with Lightyear. It was too many jokes, not enough focusing on the emotion and the characters' journeys and what they're going through at the time.
Let's see, what else did I enjoyed? I enjoyed, of course, Hemsworth is, he is Thor, at least that version of Thor. Natalie Portman, of course, is also a good Thor. But I loved his chemistry with Natalie Portman. I think they work very well together, and I think, we'll talk about her in a minute. I agree that Valkyrie is underutilized in this film. I still think that Tessa Thompson rocks it as the character.
She rocks
so good. But you're not wrong. Yeah, both her and Korg could have been much better utilized. The comedy that I particularly loved, I loved the romantic comedy montage. Because that just to me screamed like, it did feel like a 90s rom-com right there, which it's a part of Thor and Jane's life that unfortunately, because Natalie Portman left the MCU after Dark World, it's something we never got to see. We go from Dark World to Ultron, where, I think at one point Thor and Tony are, having their little contest of who's got the better girlfriend. And then we get to Ragnarok and all of a sudden they've broken up and it's just like, okay. We never got to see any of that happiness. So it was really good to see that.
Sorry, I keep forgetting stuff. Another problem I had with this film is the same problem I have with like Infinity War and Endgame, that they try so hard to undo a lot of what happened in Ragnarok. Since that film, like for example, they tried taking away his eye, they took away his hammer, they did this and that, and then it's like they gave him the whole point was that he is the god of thunder. He's not the god of hammers. And then it's like Infinity War, they give him an axe and a new eye. And then this film, they just give him back Mjolnir all over again. It's not like he gives it to like Gorr's daughter at the end. Be like, you know what? No, you have Mjolnir. I'm good with Stormbreaker. He's like, no, he has Mjolnir back, and Stormbreaker is just the little girls. So it just feels like, all right, so like you just. Why undo a lot of that film? It's one of the best films of the MCU, and you're kind of making the events have no impact since you're undoing a lot of it. The only thing that stayed was New Asgard on Earth.
Hard agree here on the Shadow Realm was so cool. Brilliant use of color or lack thereof in this case. I wish that the Shadow Realm had been where we had the big climactic fight, because it's such a unique location for the MCU. And like, I thought it was incredibly clever that I loved the shot of them approaching it and crashing into it. I thought that's a great, depth perception shot. And it was like, oh, it's just a tiny little moon. That's great.
And the shot of them walking, and you see them going around the whole planet.
Yep. Yeah, that was awesome. And I just wish that had been, we got to go back there. You're absolutely right. I love the humor, but it comes at the expense of storytelling. And I'll talk a lot more about that when we get to Gorr. You're right about pacing. This film moves at a breakneck pace with very little breathing room. And, you know, you mentioned Valkyrie and Korg. Oh, man. Compared to Darcy and Selvig, who literally is on screen for 2 seconds, maybe.
Right.
And Sif, like how excited I was to hear that. Oh, awesome! One of that few characters who's been there from the beginning is actually coming back, and she starts off, half dead, missing an arm, and is like, okay, we're just going to sideline you for the rest of this film.
Mm-hmm.
People love Sif. There's a reason that they, didn't kill her off in like Infinity War. They didn't, she got to live. She got to live through Ragnarok. Like it's been, it's just an issue with the Thor franchise. That's just a Thor problem with his films, is a lot of the times his supporting cast is his sideline. And it's like, man, I would have loved to see, in the first 3 films, so much more with the Warriors 3. What fun characters those are, and what they do so little.
Yeah, like I said earlier too, like there's talks that the original cut of the film was 4 hours. So part of me is wondering if like some of these characters had more to do, and some of the pacing was because they had to cut out a lot of the breathing room areas to get it a 2-hour time slot. People want to see it. I'm for it too. I want to see a director's cut. I'd be happy to at least once watch the director's cut, because a 4-hour movie is a lot.
It's something. And I've read the articles about, this film did get some significant cuts, and heard about, this was a studio mandated thing. They wanted to keep it at 2 hours. And it's so confusing as to what it is about this film. Where did it kind of become this weird, fun, but somewhat hollow experience? Because even I saw it twice and thought about it after seeing it the first time. I was like, yeah, you know what? I have some problems with this movie. But then when I saw it the second time, like just experiencing it, it's like, it's so fun when you're in the middle of it, but then it ends and it's just like, now I have to think about it. And it gets rough. To me, and I'm gonna make a Beatles reference here, since Miles isn't with us today to do it. So Miles, shout out to you. Love and Thunder feels like a greatest hits package. In this case, it draws primarily from the greatest hits from Ragnarok. And my Beatles reference is the album, which came out in 2000, which is called One, which is a collection of all their number 1 hits, which is a great collection of, some of their best work, but it just lacks the flavor of their original albums. And, it's like you jump from their early stuff in the 60s to their stuff at the end. You got Love Me Do, A Hard Day's Night, and then you get to the end of the album and you've got stuff off of Abbey Road and Let It Be. And it's like, these songs are all great, but they thematically, tonally don't belong together. And, the thing about, just going with the number 1 stuff is, it's amazing. And I'm going to go off on a little tangent here. It's like, it's amazing how much of the Beatles work, is considered incredible, but never hit number 1. Stuff like Strawberry Fields Forever, the entirety of Sgt. Pepper. Here Comes the Sun. It's like, you can't just take from what is the best. You've got to forge forward and give it something new. Which, in the case of the Beatles, is kind of tough, considering they've been broken up for several years, and now the metaphor is starting to fall apart. But and it's just like, that's what this felt like to me. Was Ragnarok worked? Let's try and repeat that success. instead of, trying to drive his arc forward the way that they did very well. I think in particular they did the best with Steve Rogers, who constantly had this evolving arc. Even in the movies he wasn't in, you can see it in the first Avengers movie, where he's this, to borrow a DC sort of analogy, the big blue Boy Scout. He believes that the system works. In Avengers, you can see, oh man, maybe the system doesn't work. And in Winter Soldier, it's like, yeah, it doesn't work. Civil War, it's like, yep, it doesn't work, and now we have to work against it. All the way to Infinity War, where we're not even operating as what we thought we were anymore. We're Nomad now. So I loved Steve's arc. I want Thor to have an arc that continues the way that it did in Ragnarok to Infinity War and Endgame, and now it just feels like Thor's plateauing.
Yeah.
So fun film, but it's wildly, probably the most uneven film of Phase 4
structurally,
so far.
Yeah, structurally flawed.
But let's talk about one of this film's high points. How did it feel to see Jane Foster back in the MCU after nearly 9 years?
I mean, it felt really good to see her again. Like you said, like the first two Thor movies, a lot of the side characters were sidelined. Like in the first film, I felt like Jane was just a love interest. Second film, she was like damsel in distress, and then like overcompensated by making her like, and the scientists like the big people who stop Malekith at the end. And I'm just like, okay. And then her leaving because she was unsatisfied with the work. To see her back, like, oh, right, it's good to see, like, Marvel can make amends and, treat their actors nicely. And I'm really happy to see that they followed the Mighty Thor storyline. I know Marvel has been pushing more for representation, and it's really good to see that here. And I do like that they kept the subplot in the comics where she has cancer and her taking on the powers is killing her. I really love like a lot of the messages they have with her. It's like, even about how like you got to keep fighting, like even if you think it's not the right, because like it was killing her, but she knew it's like she had to save the day because that's what to quote Ragnarok, because that's what heroes do. So I felt like I am surprised they killed her off at the end. I legit thought that Thor was going to get to eternity and wished that she would survive, because I thought they were going to continue the franchise just with Jane Foster as the Thor of the MCU. So
yes.
So I am shocked that they killed her off, but I don't think that they got rid of her for good. In the comics, she died and went to Valhalla, and Odin and Thor brought her back. So I'm assuming they're going to bring her back eventually too. I'm just surprised that they did kill her off. But yeah, I think like it was nice, and it's funny seeing a hero learning to be a hero with her catchphrases and all of that. I think that was a nice touch, because like honestly, that would be me if I got powers. Just like, all right, what's my catchphrase? You bad guy, stop. That would definitely be me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is easily her best appearance in the MCU. She has so much more to do, and she's a very fun Mighty Thor. I wish that I think it's unfortunate that her agency is diminished somewhat by virtue of the fact that she's in this film worthy to wield Mjolnir, because Thor tells Mjolnir that that's how it works. It's like she's done so much for science off screen. She's done so much good for the world. It's like, of course she's worthy. Like, this shouldn't be a problem here.
Yeah, that was a little.
So, and I do think it's unfortunate that they killed her off. we'll talk about later the post-credit scene, and yeah, it does set up the potential for her to come back. It's just rough right now that like Marvel has made all these films recently where like I think obviously the first one to go right back to is Multiverse of Madness. Like this is the second film in a row where we've had you know, a female character killed off. And in this case for Jane, like yes, it's out of the comics, but it's also rough because like her death in this film is part of the impetus for Thor's arc. Like Thor grows, you know, because he has to lose her. And that's just another thing. Like I think they need to stop with Thor's character. A lot of Thor's growth comes out of like, oh, I've lost my brother, I've lost my mother, I lost my dad, I lost all of my friends. It's like Thor loses so much.
Yeah. Honestly, the way the film started off, I legit thought that it was going to end with Thor just retiring, except for when they needed him. You know, say like, oh, he's just waiting for the day somebody's going to need him. And then again, Jane Foster was just going to take over as Thor for the MCU and give Chris Hemsworth a break and all of that. That's how I thought the film was going. So like, so I am surprised that they didn't go that route. I think that could have really been the elevation of the character you were talking about, since we have seen him say like, you know what, I don't want to be king, let somebody else do it. So I think that could have been the nice next, like, look, I don't want to be Thor anymore. Like, I've been through a lot. Let somebody else be Thor. Let me just go off and figure out my thing. Because that's a really big thing with Thor's characters. Like, he wants things at the beginning, but then when he goes through his journeys, a lot of his arcs is realizing, I don't want this. I know Chris Hemsworth has been very vocal about he wants to play the character for as long as possible. But I feel like in order to keep things unique and fresh, things got to change. You know, it's like Chris Evans going to be Captain America, so now Sam Wilson's going to be Captain America. Tony Stark going to be Iron Man, so now Ironheart's going to be the Iron Man. So I just felt like, I think to elevate the franchise, they should have done that, where they just had Thor retire, bring Chris Hemsworth back every now and again, but have the franchise focus on something else so it can still stay fresh and unique. Still keep Taika if you want to, but like have it focus on someone else for a bit.
The only other thing I wanted to say about Jane, and that you made a whole bunch of good points, and I think I'll elaborate a little bit on that when we talk about where we want to see the franchise go later on. You know, the cancer storyline is a big deal, and we get a very brief glimpse at Jane's backstory with her mother, and there's so much more they could have gone into with that. Again, there's a lot of heavy stuff going on in this, and it ends up getting sidelined for the humor and the action. So
I think would have been good, like, because I forgot to mention, I don't like how they use the Guardians in this film. They set it up like they were gonna do a lot with Thor, and then they just leave at the beginning because the Russo brothers and Taika Waititi probably didn't discuss that, and Taika's like probably like, I don't want the Guardians. But
I've got a lot to say about that. It's coming up.
but you know, like, now that I think about it, Star-Lord's mom died from cancer, so I don't see why they couldn't bring him back at the end for some kind of significance.
Yeah. I'll be talking about them in just a minute. But now I want to talk about something you mentioned as being a great part of this film, and I absolutely agree. Before this film came out, Taika Waititi claimed that Gore the God Butcher would be one of the best MCU villains yet. So my question is, did he live up to that claim? And how do you feel about how the film's opening scene with Gore set him up as a completely different type of villain?
Yes and no. I feel like he lived up to it. I loved every scene with him. My only problem is I wanted more. because you could tell like they probably filmed a lot with him, but they had to cut a lot of it out. I felt like if they just kept a few more scenes with Gore, they could have really done a good thing, because like it does feel like at times Christian Bale's doing two versions of the characters, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, but like because I loved his personality. I loved that he was intimidating. I loved that he's one of the few villains that actually accomplished almost his entire goals. Like he killed like at least 1,500 gods from the emergency contacts that the Guardians saw, and then he made it to eternity. But Thor last minute convinced him otherwise. So like he came closest, besides Thanos, obviously, at accomplishing the goals. And when it comes to the opening scene, I think it did a relatively well job. It felt rushed, like a lot of the film. I think when I was watching it for the first time with a friend, I was saying to them, like, I relate to Gore. The fact that these higher people in positions of power don't care about the little people and whether or not they suffer or not, that's a very relatable thing for the audience to understand in this day and age. Like people in positions of power that we put so much trust in not caring about us. And from a certain point of view, you can see Gore as a hero. I do wish that it was more of Gore coming to that realization, because somebody pointed out a theme with like Phase 4 with like when it comes to villains, they're not being evil by choice. They're being influenced by something. Shang-Chi's dad being influenced by the dragons in the other realm. Wanda being influenced by the Darkhold. Gore being influenced by the Necro Sword. And it's just like, yeah, it's like, it's hard to really do that when it's like, oh, you're making them a little too relatable. Like, I think the best comparison is Disney villains. The best Disney villains are the ones that are just pure evil from the beginning. Maybe have a motivation, but like you just have fun with them being bad guys. And when you just have so many things that are influencing them, it's just like, I don't know. It's harder to really claim them to be like these great villains when they're just good people who just happen to, when everyone's just a good person who just was influenced by something else. Does that make sense? I may have just rambled on a little bit.
Yeah, you're definitely right with like, and it's easy to forget that it is the Necro Sword that sort of takes control of him, because they sort of dismiss that after that opening scene, and it's just another weapon at that point. But you're right, you're absolutely right, and but Christian Bale gives such a great performance that it's one of the best performances. But again, you're right. Goodness knows how much of what he filmed was cut, but he's such a great part of this film that more of him would have only been better. I do know the one thing I do know. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, I love his personality. Like when he has the Necro Sword, like when he doesn't have it, he's like, he seems like a different character, and I get that's part of the whole like the Necro Sword's influencing him. Like when he doesn't have it, he's very much like, I am Gore, and like, whereas when he has it, he's very much like, all this talk of decapitation, I want to be a part of it. Like that's probably my favorite scene. Not even gonna lie, just because of Christian Bale's performance in that. But yeah, like I love that personality and all of that. That you just want to see more of it, and there's that old saying, always leave them wanting more. But the problem is like they didn't give us enough for it to be like enough on its own. Yeah. This is a case of we want more because we don't get much, not we want more because we loved it. We did love it, but there just wasn't much there for us that we wanted more.
We want more, and unfortunately we can't get it because he's dead.
Yeah.
And it's not a Jane Foster, I'm going to Valhalla dead, with him. This is one of those, we killed the villain and they're probably not coming back.
Yeah.
So it's frustrating. I know it's on record that there is a one thing that got cut that I really wish I could have seen is like, there's apparently a point where he does like some sort of frightening howl or scream that they actually considered to be too scary to keep in the film. And it's like, I want that. Come on, like Doctor
Deleted
Strange
scenes on the
Multiverse was
physical
pretty scary.
copy.
Yeah, at least throw that on the deleted scenes. But I actually love the opening scene for what it sets up. This whole idea of, hey, guess what? You know, the gods aren't as, you know, as wonderful as we all thought them to be. And they only double down on that when Thor gets to Omnipotent City, and we realize that, like, apart from Asgardians, it's like all the gods just don't care.
Yeah.
And what a great concept! What a great crisis of faith story this could have been, with Thor saying, like, am I really the good guy, or, you know, is everything that I believed like complete crap?
Yeah.
Like, this could have been a huge turning point for Thor, and instead, you know, I admit I love, you know, Zeus flicking off the robes and whatnot. That's hilarious. It's one of the more actually funny moments of the film. But like, it doesn't, you know, get deep from there on out. It's like, no, we're just gonna have this fun action scene, you know, but like Gore sets up so much potential conflict for Thor that they don't milk it all. And
Yeah.
you know, and also there's just this one moment when they're in the Shadow Realm where Gore just, you know, says aside to Jane, like, he understands her pain because, you know, I also wield this weapon that is drawing the life from me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, what a huge, you know, comparison to make. And because, you know, again, we're not going deeper with Jane's storyline, it doesn't really matter. All the heavy stuff is just, it's just brushed aside.
And I love that they also did that with Valkyrie, with him being all like, did you pray to the gods? Did they not come and help you? Which is just like, that was a good comparison too, showing that it actually affects Thor and the people around him. It's not just like the gods and their people and all that. You know, it's like it directly affects all of them. Because I do love that Moon Knight and this established that, you know, there are many afterlives depending on your religion. I did love that aspect of both shows. What's actually funny is, like, when I was watching that with one of my friends, when they started fighting like the henchmen in Omnipotent City, she was like, they're just gonna fight these guys in front of gods, and I'm literally there like, they just established the gods as a bunch of lazy have orgies.
Yeah, that's what they do. So there we go. That is Gore. Gore. We want more Gore. We'll talk about the gods again in a bit. I want to talk about the Guardians of the Galaxy because you made an absolutely perfect point. They were in and out so fast. And so there's a little bit of interesting history here that people get confused by. So I did have to do some research. So Guardians of the Galaxy 3 was originally set to release, you know, in spring, summer 2020 as one of the first Phase 4 films. Then in 2018, there was the whole controversy of James Gunn was fired because of old tweets that had resurfaced. And that whole time that he was not attached to the film, Marvel never, ever, you know, had someone else come in to pick up that work. So it was put on hold indefinitely. So I think it's fair to, you know, imagine back in 2019 that audiences were expecting Guardians 3 to feature Thor in some way.
Yeah.
But James Gunn has addressed that and said that, no, Thor was never a big part of my plan for this film. So I imagine that had Guardians 3 gone forward and been one of the earliest Phase 4 films, that Thor probably would have been treated in very much the same way that the Guardians were in this film, in that he gets dropped off on a random planet fairly early on in the story, and that the Guardians move on to tell the big story that, you know, they want to tell. And I don't have a problem with that. I don't even have a problem with the Guardians like, ditching Thor the way they do. But it is just that it's so fast. And most of what they get in the film is in a montage.
Yeah.
They get a montage, a very quick fight, and I just feel so bad for Dave Bautista, who got into the makeup chair and did all that and has so little to do because
he has like 2 lines, and even then they're like hidden in there.
Because it's well known he cannot stand that makeup. It's one of the reasons why he will be retiring from the role after Guardians 3. We'll miss him so much, but I can't blame him for that. That is got to be exhausting for him. And to end up doing it for so little screen time is frustrating. And it's, but knowing that, and, Taika said there was never a plan for the Guardians to be a big part of this film. So that takes the sting out of it a little bit. Yeah. But when you go back and watch Endgame, it's just like, oh, this was a great setup and really didn't lead to anything.
Yeah, and that's my big concern that I had was just like they set it up, but it goes nowhere, which it just makes it feel like, because before you would think like, oh, these directors, Kevin Feige, like they talk to each other at least a little bit, so they have ideas and all that. That now it just feels more like each director just comes in, can do what they want, and it's like a TV show. Each episode just resets the status quo as they need it for that specific episode.
So, and I get that this is, but I think it's good to ditch the Guardians at some point or land, because obviously, like we just said, there's a lot going on with Gorr. There's a lot going on with Jane. That having the Guardians be around for too long sucks out that energy even more than it already does.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned earlier, it's a problem with the entire film structurally in that everything is rushed somehow. Nothing lands, nothing has room to breathe, and
as I stated earlier, another thing is like I stated earlier, they had good potential to bring them back at the end. It's fine if they wanted to leave at the beginning and then maybe bring them back at the end, like maybe they are answering a distress call or something. Because again, you have this character who's dying from cancer, and you have another character who's like one of his main arcs and journeys is that his mother died from cancer. So I felt like that could have had some potential to have some like weight to it and like really help the characters to grow, help them understand each other. Because otherwise, they have no purpose. The only thing Star-Lord does is tell him like, it's better to feel from loss than to not have it at all. It's just like, that's his biggest significance. And okay, it just, like I said, you want these films to feel connected, and like you can tell, like if they're going to set something up, it's going to lead to something, and not just again directors resetting things as they need them for that specific movie. With like the Guardians being wasted, them undoing a lot of Ragnarok, it's just like, why are we watching these films if you're going to undo them later on?
So yeah, Guardians could have been handled better. I want to jump back to the gods again. Just talk about them as a sort of generally and specifically with the Hercules mid-credit scene. So, do you think that the inclusion of the gods is changes the landscape of the MCU, and what do you think the implications are of that mid-credit scene with Hercules?
That's a good question. Because, like I said, like Moon Knight and this now established that every religion is true in their own way. So I think it really does depend on like what story they're trying to tell at that time. Because I hope this is not another situation where it's set up and then the next directors just ignore it. Because that's a lot of implications. Like every god exists. And I want to see that built upon with like Hercules' appearance, whether it be being the villain in Thor 5 or if he's going to fill the Thor position in the Thunderbolts movie. Like are we going to see the gods realize, you know what? We have been sitting on our asses. We're a bunch of lazy assholes. And will we see them get more involved as the future films go on? It's just hard to tell at this time because it's not called the God Saga right now. It's called the Multiverse Saga. So is it going to lead to something later on in like Phase 7 and onwards, or is it just going to be... Because you were saying like the Eternity Saga, that could maybe be an interesting way to bring the gods back, especially since we see two Celestials in the area, and we see a Celestial in the Temple of Eternity.
Yeah, it ultimately makes me think, is a war with the gods coming? But if it is, like, when and where does it happen? Because you're right, this is the Multiverse Saga. We have leeway to tell some stories that stand alone. I just don't foresee a Phase 5 or 6 film focusing on a war with the gods and that problem. I feel like that is a Phase 7 thing. Yes, and part of it is because you see the Celestials. Is this going to tie back to the Eternals? Because they clearly already have a problem with the Celestials there. So, yeah, I have a feeling that even though people may want to see Hercules sooner, I don't think that the conflict with Zeus is going to get resolved anytime soon.
Yeah, and like I said, like there's been rumors, like people are speculating, could Hercules be the Thor role in the Thunderbolts movie? And I think that could be a good way to like set it up, like with like Hercules really dealing with a lot of the dilemmas, like because seeing him interact with humans and like the people that are worshiping the gods, maybe that could help him also realize like Thor was right this whole time, and then that could set up a god war later on. At least that's my theory on the matter. Again, I just don't want it to be a Guardians or situation where it's set up but goes nowhere.
Yeah. We'll see. We'll see. It could be part of one of those 8 unannounced projects. It could be something that stands alone. They do have a little bit of leeway to tell standalone stories coming up. But now that the problem is now that they've got us all excited about Secret Wars, we just want to know, how we're building up to that more than anything. But let's jump to the post credits scene, where we get to see Valhalla. Jane is welcomed into Valhalla by one of the MCU's just fan favorite characters, Heimdall. I'm shocked that they got Idris Elba back to film one scene after he's
especially since he's like Natalie Portman. He's been very open with he has not had a good experience in the Marvel films, especially with the first 2.
And now he's gone off to work with James Gunn on the Suicide Squad, and likely has a brighter future with that franchise than he does with Thor. But does this imply that we could see Valhalla in a future Thor film or just a future MCU project and see the return of these characters who we had thought were gone forever?
Mm-hmm. And that I would like to see, because like you said, like a lot of his side characters were just underutilized, and even this film made fun of that. It's just like, and this guy died, and him, and whoever this guy is. And it's just like, that's disrespectful to not only the characters, but the actors playing them. And I want to see them treated with a lot more respect. Because these are great characters played by great actors. They just weren't given much to work with, because the first 2 films were not fan favorites. And then Taika just gets rid of them in Ragnarok and all that. I hope it is, but a trend I've seen lately is like the mid-credit scenes seem to be the ones that have more significance, like they're clearly setting stuff up. Because in a lot of the recent films, the after-credit scenes are more like just, like punchlines to something else, or just random moments. The after credit scenes feel like they're not what they used to be. It's now about the mid credit scenes, probably because I think Kevin Feige realizes most people are leaving anyway. They don't want to sit through credits. Let's put the big one in the middle, and then the after credits just be something for the fans.
Yeah, it's either something like Thor that kind of wraps a nice little bow around everything, assuming that this could be the end, or it's a multiverse of madness scenario where it's Pizza Papa and it's a gag, or it's the Captain, which I think is one of their best gag ones, is the Captain America one in Homecoming. That's their best post-credit joke scene ever, and they're never going to top it. Yeah, I'd love to see Valhalla. I'd love to see characters come back. Mostly, again, because I love the idea that Jane's story isn't over. But, again, right now we're in the middle of setting up Secret Wars. There's a lot to do. I hope down the road this is something we'll get to see. But speaking of the future, where do you want to see Thor next? Do you want to see him in... Are you ready for the next solo film, or are you just ready for Thor to take a back seat to all the new characters and join the Avengers? Do you want to see Thor teaming up with another solo hero? Like maybe Thor will become the next Hulk, show up in someone else's story.
I feel like it has potential to be another standalone film, but recently, like I said, Taika Waititi, and I agree with him, there should be some space and leeway in between them. It's like you don't want to milk your popular franchise because it's like your last big name character from the beginning, Let Thor breathe a little bit. Moving forward, I do want to see Thor take more of a back seat and like really build upon his arc. And like I said, like maybe have him where he wants to spend a few years just not fighting. And, expand upon the Thor mythos, because Thor has a lot of interesting stuff with his stories in the comic books, with a lot of different characters that they can use. But the films are just more focused on Chris Hemsworth and the character, that his world building doesn't really exist that much. Asgard was just a place in the first 3 Thor movies that they literally just move it to a new location. And all the world building in Ragnarok was more on Sakaar than it was on Asgard. I want to see, maybe, like I said, like I legit thought that Jane was going to survive at the end and she would fill that position. If they don't plan on bringing her back, at least not for a while, I want to see Beta Ray Bill. I think he's way overdue.
Yes.
Because, first of all, we saw a statue of him in Ragnarok. We know he's in the universe. And we know there's probably at least been another Stormbreaker. Because, A, he had the mold in Infinity War. What was his name? Dietrich? I forget his name.
Oh, Eitri.
Mitri?
Eitri.
He had the mold, which, you could say, oh, he had the mold. But then Zeus establishes Stormbreaker was the key to opening eternity. So there had to have been another Stormbreaker in order to be the key. And Beta Ray Bill is the only other character who has had Stormbreaker, because that was his hammer in the comics. I legit thought when they announced Christian Bale was in the movie, but we didn't know who he was playing, I thought Christian Bale was going to play Beta Ray Bill.
Oh, I would love that. I've been waiting since I think after Dark World, I was just like, okay, guys, we need Beta Ray Bill on this, and such a tease in Ragnarok.
And maybe just you brought her back, make a Sif standalone like spin-off. Have her explore more of like Asgard and the worlds connected to him, and a lot of the side characters. Give Thor a break.
Yeah.
I know Chris Hemsworth is a big name. He's like one of the major franchises. But if you want the franchise to live on, you got to show that you have faith in these other characters.
Sif was popular enough during the time of the first 2 films that she got to, be on a couple episodes of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah.
And the only problem with that now is, how does Shield fit in? How is it a multiverse story at this point? How much of it is canon? That kind of those questions come up now.
Yeah.
I mean, and it was great though to see her again though in Loki. That was a wonderful moment to see her come back for that, even if it's not, even if it's only her as a simulation. It was still good to see Jamie Alexander. Yeah, I would love to see a Sif story. I'd love to see Beta Ray Bill. As for Thor himself, if we don't see Thor before it, I just about guarantee we'll see him in Kang Dynasty. He'll be
I
the veteran Avenger. Yeah.
I definitely guarantee he's going to be in the Avengers films, but I feel like for standalone, they should give him a break. Say he's off raising Love, I think is what they're calling her now. Love Thor daughter, I think is going to be, considering everybody's like Odin's son and all that. I'm just like, Love Thor daughter. Say he's off doing that, so we can focus on building the world of Thor's franchise.
Yep, and I agree. If there's a fifth Thor movie, which I don't think is out of the question at all, I just do not see it as part of that Phase 6 lineup. I think you're right. It's time for him to breathe. If he's still up to it after Phase 6, sure, do Thor 5 in Phase 7. But I do think that for his next solo film, it's once again to have a sort of reevaluation the way that Ragnarok was and take the tone of the franchise in another direction, because trying to mimic the success of Ragnarok clearly, made for a fun movie, but again, a movie that didn't feel complete.
Yeah, the best franchises in the best films in this franchise, they always tried something new. Winter Soldier was completely different than anything we've ever seen. Guardians of the Galaxy, completely different than anything we've seen. Ragnarok, completely different. Even Guardians Volume 2 and Civil War, they're different than their previous films. And I know Taika Waititi, he's creative enough, he could come up with something new to keep the franchise fresh. But, part of me thinks it's because of the pandemic that Feige wanted to rush a lot of these projects out. And I think that's evident with the VFX people coming out with how it's been working with that studio at this time with such strict deadlines, and Marvel not being willing to push deadlines, that I was hoping it was a matter of they were just trying to catch up a little bit with the pandemic. But given that we now have 2 phases within the next 3 years, I don't see it changing, and we're going to keep getting some bad special effects, not even going to lie.
I honestly think it depends on, it's going to depend on what kind of story they're trying to tell and what directors they have at the helm. I think it's really tragically funny that after Love and Thunder, which I didn't even bring up, I wanted to mention, yes, there's some special effects in this one that are subpar, and I absolutely feel terrible for the people who worked on this film, knowing that this was probably a very rushed project. But I think it's tragically funny how people are looking back at Eternals and saying, oh, wow, a lot of this film looks spectacular because Chloe Zhao actually, filmed real landscapes and used a lot of was actually filmed, on site. And it's yeah, that was the whole point. It wasn't this big CG mishmash of craziness. And I just based on the trailer, I think Black Panther is going to be handled with much more care than some of these films have been recently. Whether or not it's Taika handling Thor from here on out, I'm ready for them to reevaluate the character once again and, try to find that balance between comedy and depth that, just because one film worked doesn't mean we need to take what worked from it. It's not going to, lightning does not, oh, that's perfect with Thor. Lightning does not always strike twice in the same place. Okay. So yeah, I'm actually talking about the success of these Phase 4 films here. So Love and Thunder has followed this sort of Phase 4 trend of having a really, really strong opening weekend at the box office and taking a massive, and I don't want to over dramatize this because it's not much more massive than average, but it is a higher than average drop in its second week. And it makes me wonder, has Marvel, are we at a plateau with Marvel, and do you expect this trend to continue? If so, for how much longer? And I do want to point out that yes, most of the Phase 4 films have taken an approximately 65 to 67% drop in their second weekend at the box office, which is about 10% higher than they had been before. Now, a 50% drop makes a lot of sense for a lot of films anyways. Now, it should be pointed out that in some cases, like with No Way Home, of course that film was going to take a big drop in its second weekend because its opening weekend was ginormous. Like it was not Avengers huge, but it was bigger than anything we'd seen since before the pandemic. Yeah. So that film, of course, had to have a big drop.
I remember trying to get tickets for that, and people were flooding the theater sites, crashing the sites because they were not used to the amount of people. They were not expecting that many people to get tickets for Spider-Man, that it took forever to get my tickets for it.
Yeah, so Spider-Man's the anomaly here just because it is by far their most financially successful film of Phase 4. But every other film, and Black Widow is also a bit of an anomaly because it opened sort of at the tail end of the Delta variant when we were all still a little bit wary about going back to theaters, and it also premiered day and date on Disney Plus, which none of the other films have done. All the other films have had, the roughly 2-month wait.
Yeah.
So all that information, there. Do you think that we've hit a plateau with Marvel for now? Do you expect it to continue, and how much longer if you do?
I do think we've hit a bit of a plateau, but I think that's also because, like I mentioned, it feels like they're rushing stuff out, either to play catch up with, like I said, the pandemic. It's like they lost 2 years. They want to get some films out there. So that's, I think, what's been the biggest problem with Phase 4. And I see it continuing till at least probably Secret Wars. Because like I said, we have 2 whole phases just within the next 3 years. It's like, and they have more movies and shows on there than any other phase. Like Phase 6 and 5 each alone are probably 2 of the biggest phases in the entire franchise. I think Phase 1 was like 6 films. I think Phase 2 was like 5 films. Phase 3, I think it was like what, like 6 to 8 films?
Oh, it was more than 10.
Oh, it was?
Yeah, there were. I think it was. Oh. They were quite. Phase 3 was. Now we look back and we're like, oh, little Phase 3. No, Phase 3 was big when it happened.
But they still had like a good amount of time, at least, like, because I think it started in what, like 2016? Hang on, Age of Ultron and Ant-Man came out around 15. So Phase 3 started around 16. Endgame came out around 2018, 2019. So
2019.
And those were just movies, 2-hour-long movies each. And now we're adding whole TV shows where, WandaVision was 9 episodes, and each episode for all of these series being 40 minutes to an hour. You got like 9 episodes for WandaVision, 6 for Moon Knight, 6 for Hawkeye. So basically, it's like they're filming 2 whole movies that they have to do. Yeah. And then now you got Daredevil, which is 18 episodes, to where, like, if those are full-length episodes, that's going to be a lot to film in less than 3 years by the time it has to come out. And not to mention Charlie Cox is also going to be in She-Hulk. He's going to be in the Spider-Man animated show. He's going to be in Echo.
Mhm.
that he's going to be overworked in these phases.
Yeah.
So I feel like just because they're trying to push so much out in such a short amount of time, we're going to continue to see that plateau because it's not going to give directors, VFX artists, writers the amount of time they need to truly make the films that they want. They're going to have to settle and make compromises to meet deadlines. Because say what you want about DC, they're willing to postpone their movies to make sure the effects are right, to give directors more creative freedom. And I'm hoping that Phase 7 can see a difference because I know Kevin Feige is a businessman. If he sees things are not going right, I'm hoping he can look at it and be like, all right, we need to make changes. That's my hope. So Phase 7 is where I feel like we would start to see changes. Unless Kevin Feige decides, you know what? People are right. We're rushing things. Let's postpone movies. I don't do this often. Let's postpone Secret Wars and all of these other films so we can deliver quality over quantity.
I'm going to make a bold prediction here, and I don't think it's going to last. I think this film, in particular, may be an anomaly. In fact, these two films, I would say, might be an anomaly, but they are coming up fairly quickly. As long as they are handled with care, particularly in the VFX department, I think that we will see a much stronger box office performance and better fan reaction from Wakanda Forever, because it's an important film, because the first was a massive cultural phenomenon and remains. I think No Way Home may have topped it as the most successful non-Avengers film in the MCU, but it is still that at least puts it as the second most successful non-Avengers film in the MCU, and arguably rightfully so. It's a very, very well-made film. And based on the trailer for Wakanda Forever, I really do think Marvel is trying to push this one as its prestige film for Phase 4. It's the only one I've seen a trailer with where they just have in big bold letters from director Ryan Coogler. It's like, yeah, you're trying to push the name of an awards-worthy director out there, and yes, there are definitely some visual effect shots in that trailer, but a lot of it felt a lot more like it was, it felt more real.
And I agree with you that there's probably going to be some good successes there, but I think a lot of that will come down to who's in the director's chair. Because you mentioned with Eternals, that one looked so amazing because the director wanted to film on location. Because one of the big problems is can the directors first come in with a strong enough vision that they are confident with it? Because a lot of the problems I hear, especially with the VFX, directors are coming in and changing things last minute and giving the VFX teams very little time to make the necessary changes in the amount of time they have. So I feel like if you have your Ryan Cooglers and other directors who are coming in with strong visions, it's going to happen. But the problem is some of these directors, like Taika Waititi, he's a more of a go with the flow director, letting people improvise and come up with stuff on the spot. So obviously when it comes time to the cutting room floor, not everything's going to line up perfectly. And will they have the time to go back and fix that is the big issue. I think that's one of the reasons why this one didn't work. And so, like I said, it's going to depend on who's in the director's chair. But since Marvel shows that they like to get indie directors, there's going to probably be a lot of times where there's going to be some times where they're not going to be confident in exactly what they want, but they're not going to have the times to fix it because things have to be rushed out and met by deadlines, by Feige, Disney, Marvel, whoever.
That's been a problem. This is a problem that's not just one. It's not just a Marvel problem. It's a problem with a lot of Hollywood in general. But I do think that using Marvel as your prime example is important because they are currently one of the biggest leaders in the industry for just about anything. You're going to get a better product when you give your team the time to do it and don't put them under so much pressure. But I do think Wakanda Forever, because it's Black Panther, it's a cultural phenomenon. I think it has a shot at, you know, because the first Black Panther was a film that it only dipped about 40% in its second weekend. If Black Panther 2 can repeat that success, then it's going to be something, a sort of resurgence for them. And I think Quantumania has that shot. Again, this is one they have to handle very delicately and not try and rush, because it's got Kang, it has MODOK. But they're releasing it in February, which is traditionally kind of a dead month. If it's, go ahead.
And I think my thing I've been thinking about is not necessarily just box office numbers, but critical reception, because like that's been a big problem with the MCU is people, since they're not delivering quality, people are going to start losing interest, and eventually they're going to start losing people coming, because like as good as the film's going to be, they're going to start being like, oh, it's a Marvel film, you know, they haven't been good since this year or whatever for this long, that even if it is like an amazing film like Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, you know, like since people aren't going, you know, because of its connection to the franchise as a whole, if that makes sense.
You know what else? I didn't even think about this until now. It's very possible too that people are starting to catch on that, you know what, we just have to wait about 2 months and then we can stream it at home. Like, why bother to go see it in the movie theater? So people could just be waiting it out. That could be a thing now. So yeah, I think that the handful of films like Wakanda Forever, certainly the Avengers films will, you know, and you're right about critical reception too. I think Cinema Score, I think Black Widow ended up with like an A-, which I think people, even though I would rank it lower among the Phase 4 films, I think people are just very excited to be back in the movie theater for that. Not that it's a bad movie, but it doesn't push things forward the way a lot of other Phase 4 films do. But like Shang-Chi got an A, Spider-Man got an A+. And then we get to Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange, I think, ended up with a B Cinema Score, which is like, whoa. Like, and, you know, B doesn't mean bad, but it's like, you know, we all came into, I think a lot of us went into Doctor Strange with high expectations of, yes, this is going to be it's like, it was fine. Same with Thor. Like, yes, a sequel to Ragnarok. It was fine, you know?
Yeah.
And eventually people are not going to be okay with fine.
Yeah.
So now that we've talked about that, let's talk about where you would rank Love and Thunder among the Phase 4 films. And, you know, we don't need to factor in the shows at this point. That's just so much to think about.
Honestly, there's still some shows I need to get caught up on just because there's so many. And like I said, with so much content that I now have to watch. You know, it's not like I could just go to the theater for 2 hours, watch it. I have to now spend 40 minutes to an hour every week.
Yeah. So, yeah, where would you place Love and Thunder among the six Phase 4 films we have at this point?
Yeah. I ranking all of them, I still think I would put Eternals close to the bottom. I'm kind of flip-flop if it's worse than Black Widow. I've been kind of reevaluating. And then that's where I probably would put Thor Love and Thunder. Just because, like, it's fun, you really enjoy it, but it doesn't take the serious moments and let the time breathe, which Doctor Strange does too. It's also pretty funny, but like there are some moments where like the characters will evaluate the situation and take itself seriously. Then again, top two, Shang-Chi, No Way Home, go back and forth wherever you want to put them, just because like they're both just so good. I can't decide. Yeah. Last time I put Shang-Chi above. Do I still put it above, or is No Way Home above? Now, I don't know. They're both amazing.
I know I'm going to rattle some chains with this one, so I'm going to go in order from first to last. So as of right now, No Way Home is my favorite. but Shang-Chi is a close second. It was just good to see a brand new character handled very well. And here's where I start.
A standalone film that's not like you have to watch a million films to understand it. It's like,
yep.
It's like, all right, we're watching Iron Man again. It's just a film about the character with maybe some little hints.
Here's where I start rattling the chains. I still, despite its lukewarm reception when it originally opened, I would still put Eternals third because I appreciate the ambition. I agree. It's slow at parts. It doesn't have the most interesting characters, but I do think it tells a more well-structured story.
Yeah.
I hope the next one is more engaging. Let's say that. Then Doctor Strange, because I do think Doctor Strange tells a complete story. You know, it has its issues, and those issues, as we discussed, a little while back, are pretty much revolving around Wanda. Yeah. Then Black Widow, and yes, I would put Thor at the bottom. I do think that it has the least structurally sound story of them all, and even though Black Widow lacks the tension of who's going to live and die, because we all know it's a prequel, it takes itself seriously enough in the moments when it needed to. So it's been such a weird phase. I think this will be a much easier ranking. How would you rank Love and Thunder among the 4 Thor films?
Oof. Bottom, I gotta put Thor: The Dark World. I think that's a pretty safe bet. Again, it was just mostly boring, that one. Probably the worst villain out of any of the Thor movies, easily. I love Christopher Eccleston, but he got screwed over with Malekith. I'm not gonna lie. And most of the good parts in that film you could find in other movies. And honestly, like, I want to put Love and Thunder second, but part of me wants to also put it at third, just because I think Thor is an underrated film, and I do feel like it's way more structurally sound than the Love and Thunder. And then put the first Thor movie possibly as second, but number one, Ragnarok. You got to put Ragnarok at the top.
In that, I 100% agree, and I also 100% agree with The Dark World. It's that first Marvel film that went through production hell, and it shows. I would still put Love and Thunder in second place over the first Thor, only because...
I mean, like I said, it's very back and forth with me on those films, just because, honestly, I haven't even seen the first one in so long, but, like, I remember it still being way more structurally sound, and it's always nice seeing Loki as the villain.
Yeah, that's one of its core strengths is that original Loki performance is so good and set us up for so much that I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to put Love and Thunder third, because you know what? You're right. Thor has something that Love and Thunder doesn't. It has Tom Hiddleston.
Yeah.
And I love Gore, but Gore is never going to be, and Gore's a great villain, but he's never going to be as iconic as Loki.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll go Ragnarok, Thor, Love and Thunder, The Dark World.
Mm-hmm. And again, that can be very back and forth on 2 and 3. I know, like, I say that a lot on this show, but it's just because, like, art is subjective. It's hard to really, and opinions change on movies. So there are some films I hated when I first watched them, and now I love, and vice versa. Films I loved when I first watched and then hated later on.
All right. So it is time to start wrapping things up, delivering the final thoughts. Travis, what are your final thoughts on Thor, Love and Thunder?
Final thoughts. One of the most enjoyable films, I will admit, but that doesn't necessarily translate to one of the best in the franchise, not just in this phase, but as a whole. I do really wish that they just took the time to really let certain moments sit, pull back on the humor. And I know he's got his own standalone thing. It's supposed to go other places, but I feel like this film could have helped with Loki's presence. Just because Thor and Korg, for example, like those characters, they're very big, boastful personalities, and having that more grounded personality of Loki that really just looks at the situation and just like, this is a very dumb thing to do, Thor. Like, please don't do this. I think that could have helped this film a bit, because when you just let that one like big personality person go out there by himself without that grounded, it's that comedy duo thing. You need a big personality and then a small personality to bounce off of each other. And unfortunately, Korg couldn't fill that. Jane Foster couldn't fill that. Valkyrie couldn't fill that. But yeah, just like I wish it took a bit more of a breather, but overall, still enjoy it. I just hope that, like in the future, directors, Taika Waititi or whoever, can really elevate the franchise again. Because this film just felt like it was just another film in the franchise and nothing that really changed anything.
Usually I don't prepare a statement for my final thoughts, but I just felt like I had to for this time around because I have a little bit more to say just about the phases as a whole. So here we go. Love and Thunder. It feels like both a product of the big studio machine with its supposedly studio mandated 2-hour runtime, but it also feels like an auteur piece gone off the rails because Taika Waititi's signature style is all over it. It's wildly entertaining to watch in the moment, but ultimately there are too many moments that feel incomplete or hollow after you've seen it. The cast do an admirable job with what they have, and as Korg puts it in the film, it's classic Thor. Yeah. It's a mishmash of everything we have come to love about the character and the franchise the whole time, which, while that's fun, it can start to feel static. I've already said Tony and Steve have both had well-defined arcs in their films and their respective Avengers films. They felt like they were constantly evolving. Yeah. Thor got that between Ragnarok and Endgame, and now is not the time to keep him and that franchise in a comfort zone, which is what this film is comfortable. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I'm going to finish this up real quick.
Sorry.
I think it's okay. I think MCU fans are hitting a point in Phase 4 that is incredibly divisive. It's a time of change, and this phase, more than others, is a passing of the torch. James Bond and Godzilla fans know this very well. Those are franchises that both underwent massive changes in the 1970s, which I will point out, yes, I was not alive during the 1970s. I did not experience it in real time, but I've been a fan of those franchises my whole life. But the 1970s for those franchises was an era that remains divisive amongst fans of those films. But they don't, well, there are always toxic fans with every franchise, but it's the divisiveness of those franchises, I think, is something we've come to accept because those franchises have been around for 50 plus years. Marvel is still only in its 14th year. And it's time for MCU fans to accept there are going to be eras or phases that they're going to appreciate less than some of the others. And that's just going to be the ebb and flow of this whole thing. Phase 2 was, I think, before Phase 4, the most inconsistent, but we only say that now because it had the Dark World and Ultron. Otherwise, it's generally a very well appreciated phase with films like Winter Soldier and Guardians of the Galaxy. This phase we look at now, and it's going to have 7 films, and if Black Panther is a dud, that means we got Shang-Chi and Spider-Man as like the big highlights. And then again, it's a big experiment with television. They're doing so much now. There's a lot of saturation. So it's time to accept the fact that, this franchise is huge. Not everything is going to be as big as what we got in Phase 3 and feel as tight and connected. So yeah, that's my spiel on this movie and on this phase, this interesting experiment of a phase.
Yeah, I will bring up one thing. I heard an interesting fan theory about this film. Some people have stated that the reason why it has such a more comedic tone is because the film opens and closes with narration from Korg, and some people believe that the whole film is just Korg telling the story. And as you know, Korg, he has a very exaggerated way of telling stories, like, oh, I tried to start a revolution but didn't print enough pamphlets, and that could explain why it was heavy more on the comedic tones. And I feel like that's a good theory, but I feel like unless you have Korg narrating throughout the whole thing, that's just, it doesn't work as well, because otherwise, because there's plenty of films that open and close with a narration but still have a very distinct tone and all that. If throughout the film you hear Korg like, oh yeah, and this thing happened here, or like something happens and then you hear Korg like, wait, no, that's not how it went. Let's go back and change that. Because honestly, if they did that, that could have made this a very unique MCU movie, and I think that could have helped. Could have helped saved a lot of the tone and structural problems, and why like certain heavy moments are filled with comedic bits. Considering again, Korg's very exaggerated way of telling stories.
Man, that'd be a very interesting theory if it were true, because I do like his narration of, again, the romantic comedy aspect of it is like, yeah, that's one of the highlights of this whole film.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, oh man, it's going to be really interesting to see what comes out in the next few years about this film that we don't know now, the way that, we've sort of learned, some of the stories about what happened, the behind the scenes drama with Dark World or with, Ant-Man, or Ultron. Like, it'll be so interesting. But it's time for trivia. And speaking of Korg narrating, that's actually a huge part of this question. So, Korg's fireside tale of Thor is an homage to which classic 1980s action film? Is it A, Highlander, B, Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, C, Silverado, or D, Big Trouble in Little China?
The problem is I don't know at all. So I'm going to take a guess, and I'm just going to say Highlander. Probably wrong, but 25% chance if I pick one at random.
Well, I've got bad news and good news. The bad news is the answer is Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. The good news is you're still tied with Jalen for the lead overall, so not much to worry about at the moment. But yeah, it's and I haven't seen Mad Beyond Thunderdome in such a long time, but I do vaguely remember the fireside chat at the beginning of that film. So, and this film, much like Ragnarok, definitely, pays an homage to the 80s. It's very much a retro film.
Now, if you asked who they were referencing with Korg's boyfriend at the end named Dwayne, then I would have got that for you.
Well, I do feel this is a victory for me because on the last episode, I had a trivia question, and one of my panelists literally answered the question during our regular conversation. And so by the time we got to it, I was like, you know what? Everyone gets a point this week because I can't ask this question because you brought it up. So that is our spoiler cast. Thor, Love, and Spoilers, episode 52 of the Sunday Matinee. It is not the end of Marvel episodes coming up. I am planning on talking about Ms. Marvel, which recently ended its 6-episode run on Disney+. Hopefully I'll have Travis back on for that. It's going to be interesting because I know we are both in the thick of theater right now. So, yes, we both actually have lives outside these little conversations. So it's going to be really wild to see when the next episode happens and with whom. Right now, next week, we should be coming back to move away from Marvel for a little bit. We're going to be talking about in a conversation that's literally going to have spun out of the Obi-Wan episode, fan edits. So we'll see how that goes. That should be a fun, broad topic to talk about. But for now, we're going to sign off. Travis, thank you for being here to talk about Thor. It is always a pleasure to talk about comic book stuff with you, with another very passionate fan.
It's just nice to have a place where I can talk about this stuff. Most of the people in my personal lives I can't talk about this stuff with because they're just casual fans.
Yep, we're weird and we love it. So that is going to be it for episode 52 of the Sunday Matinee. Thank you for watching or listening if you have caught the audio version of this episode, which, I will get to eventually. They will be converted to audio and it'll be amazing. So for now, everyone, thank you very much. Have a good week watching your movies and have a safe week, and I'll see you next time.